I guess, yeah. So essentially what I wanted to talk about today was whatever you want to talk about. So I'll talk a bit about myself to give you an idea of kind of what I'm up to and what I've done, and then feel free to just hammer me with however many questions you like. I brought my iPad so I can draw out any sort of features or concepts or anything and kind of like draw out what I'm talking about. So, but yeah, feel free to just kind of hammer me with questions, and I'm happy to answer any of it. So I guess a little bit about myself. I'm Singh, of course. I'm South African, Canadian, soon to be British. So that's kind of interesting. I started coding when I was 11 years old. Made video game engines, 3D video game engines, Half-Life engine, AI for that, multiplayer. Started my robotics team when I was about 17 years old. Started in tech when I was about 17. Dropped out of university for AI. Started my first company when I was 19. Sold it when I was 22. Started a second company when I was 24. Exited when I was 26. Moved to London, 27, started my third company now, which is Guild. So thanks for signing up using Guild. First company was in corporate management, so about managing different companies, how they all kind of work together, how they all interoperate together. Filed a few patents on that, North American provisional patents. Second company was in the real estate industry, so it was more about gathering neighbor information and kind of reselling that neighbor information. So that was about 26 people that I managed directly. And in between all these companies, I've done a lot of corporate management consulting. Most, I think, interestingly, about 140 people I managed. Standard Chartered Bank out of Singapore, and more recently, chief data architect for Honeywell, from everything from jet engines to thermostats. Did that globally. So a pretty wide gamut in there, but just to say, ask me about any of those things. So feel free to ask me about any of that. I recently did a podcast where I spoke about 50 minutes at a pretty high level. I was hoping to go much deeper today with any of you. And so I think I only have 20 minutes, however. So I don't know how deep I can go.
You can take more time because one speaker hasn't arrived.
Okay, cool.
So
Let me see if Lois has messaged me back. Not yet. Okay, cool. So feel free to ask me as many questions as you like about any of those things. I wrote down on my iPad that we can talk about. Oh, it's going to connect. There we go. I do not want a hotspot. Management, I can talk about strategy, business modeling, corporate structure, co-founders, fundraising, but literally anything else as well. So does anyone have any questions off the get-go? Yes?
How much coffee do you consume when starting a company?
How much wood does a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood?
There we go.
Right back at you.
Touche.
I don't know. I used to drink a lot of coffee, like three, 4 coffees a day. Now I only drink 1 coffee a day.
Do you find that maybe like you could get addicted to these substances like coffee easier if you're really grinding on a startup?
You know what? For me, no. I don't like to kind of push myself too hard. I find you just burn out way too easily, and you need to manage yourself as much as you manage others. And so I find that just 1 coffee a day is fine. And frankly, I had no coffee or no caffeine or anything for a very long time as well. And I actually preferred that to anything else. I find the one thing that I do find a bit difficult, especially from a London time zone, is I'm working in every time zone. And so often I end up working very early to very late. And so my sleep schedule is just constantly offset. And so I primarily use coffee as a tool to kind of help manage my sleep schedule more than anything else, rather than as a stimulant. No worries. Yes?
I'm maybe curious, you've started 3 companies or more. How do you organize your teams such that you can create an environment where innovation is fostered?
That's a fantastic question, yeah. And that's something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. As I said, in particular, I've started my own companies, but I've also been a technical management consultant for much bigger companies as well. So I'm literally brought in to solve these problems. So how do I foster innovation? Well, first things first is I don't like people telling me what to do. I don't think anyone likes people telling them what to do, right? So you need to feel like you're involved in that process. And so what I like to think about is consensus over correctness. So like, what do I mean by that? Well, just let me draw it on my iPad. Disagree. Get out of here, Dan.
There we go.
So what do I mean by that? So this is the way that I think about it personally. is I have a 2x2. Let's say I have something like this, I have something like that, right? So up here I have right. Right down here I have wrong. And right here I have agree. And down here I have disagree. I'm terrible at handwriting, you can see that now. So fundamentally, like, I hope everyone on my team is going to do this, right? Everyone's going to do what they think is right. If someone's doing what they think is wrong, like, why are you on my team? You know. So everyone's going to do what they think is right. But as a manager, it's your goal to get everyone to agree, right? And those two things might not be the same thing. Like if I ask you, how should we build this piece of software? And you say, I don't know, Node.js, and I say, no, we should do Java. I don't know. Both of us are right? You probably have ways that you're right, I have ways that I'm right, but fundamentally, we disagree on what we're doing. So that's not really a way to move forward, that's not really a way to achieve consensus, even though we both believe that we're correct, right? So what I'd like to do is find a way to agree. So how do we agree on that? Well, maybe instead of saying, how do we build this whole platform, maybe we whittle that down to the smallest common thing that we can do. Maybe we look at how do we build this one feature? How do we build the sign-up form? How do we build, you know, oh, let you seat it there.
Sorry about that.
No worries. I think there's a seat here you can steal. So, like, how do we build the smallest thing, and maybe observe how that thing is built, and use that as a piece of study to build something larger? So maybe we build the sign-up form, maybe we build like the smallest feature possible in Java and Node.js or whatever it is, and kind of achieve some sort of consensus from that. But the main thing I'm trying to look for is a method to agree. And what I find is, typically speaking, if you disagree, you're trying to do something too big, and you can typically agree on something that's much smaller. So try to find the smallest thing possible to get your team to agree, do that thing, then do the next thing, and then do the next thing, and then keep moving forward in that way. So that's kind of one thing I do is that. In terms of finding what to work on, let me just get rid of this here. Ugh. It's probably a better way of doing that, but we'll figure that out in time. So in terms of figuring out what to work on, I have another technique that I call pain versus frequency. So what I do is I write out a chart like this, and I write it out like that. And here we have high pain, low pain, high frequency, low frequency. And I ask my team to plot out what they're working, like what their concerns are in this type of format. So let's say the entire system goes down once a month, right? That's pretty painful, but it might be low frequency. So I might put that over here, right? Let's say I have user support issues every single day, right? That's like pretty low pain maybe, but it's pretty high frequency. I'll put that over here. Let's say QA and CI takes a very long time to run. That's, again, maybe low pain, high frequency, maybe goes over there. But it kind of helps us kind of ideate on what is high pain, what is low pain, what is high frequency, what is low frequency, such that basically we should be focusing on what's inside this box as number 1. This is maybe like a 2, this is maybe a 2 as well, and this is like a why are we even bothering talking about that, because it's low pain, low frequency, right? But fundamentally this helps frame the conversation in terms of like, hey, what should we work on, what is important to our team, what's causing my team the most pain, the most frequently, and then we can use that to kind of ideate on kind of the next steps as well. I also like this type of structure for talking with non-technical teams. Because, for example, talking with marketing, all right? If I say, hey, marketing, what's your highest pain, highest frequency issues? That's a structure that they can understand, right? Engineers can understand this, marketing can understand this, any sort of department across the whole company can understand that. And so this is something else that I do as well. Something else I do, I can talk about this all day, so feel free to interrupt me anytime. Something else I do is, I'm terrible at erasing things apparently. Something else I do is this is a bit controversial, I try to minimize the amount of middle management I have. So typically I've been fortunate, I've been in a position of upper management, and I try to get my reports to be as close to me as physically possible. So how have I achieved that in practice? So a typical corporate structure is to have kind of, like one report, you have a bunch of reports down here, then you have kind of all these people reporting up to like, maybe like some people over here, and you have these people reporting up to like someone up there, right? But what I find is this layer here is, the source of the most type of like broken telephone in both directions, right? Because these people are trying to report up into them, and they're trying to absorb as much of it as possible, and these people are trying to report into there, and they're trying to absorb as much of it as possible. And that method of absorption, I find, hasn't been great in terms of running a cutting-edge tech company. It's maybe great in a more traditional company, but in terms of cutting edge, I kind of want to hear what this person has to say. I kind of, they might have to say something important. Again, we're trying to find consensus over correctness. If this person is getting kind of managed down, I might not up here kind of hear about that, right? There's kind of a level of politics happening in this level more often than not that I try to minimize. So how have I kind of gotten around that or addressed that? I need to find a better way to, how do I do this? Hey, look at that. Whew. We're learning together.
It's very hard to adjust.
Oh, apparently we're in a nightclub now. You got it, or?
Let me try.
It's very fine-grained, this
Just
tool.
try to tune it down a little bit so you can see the screen better.
Can everybody
You got
see?
it?
Can you see?
Yes.
Everybody can see.
You got it? All right, cool. So what do I do? So what I do is first of all, try to minimize that middle management layer physically, as much as physically possible. What I do is I take some of that role and move it up to senior management, and I take some of that role and move it down to the individual contributors. How do I do that? So I split everyone up into squads of 6. So let's say I have a squad of 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have essentially what I call a rotating leader role inside that. So let's say the leader is this person here. They're the leader for 1 month. Their duty is to have a stand-up with the rest of the squad, is to talk about what they're working on, if they're blocked by any means, if they understand what they're working on, if there's any concerns, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Take that and talk to the senior management stand-up right after that meeting, where they can, with this leader here, can report that directly to senior management. And the key thing is that this role rotates. So every month, 1 month it's this person's, next month it's that person's, next month it's that person's, and it kind of just rotates through. So every year, you're the leader twice a year, basically.
But actually, the skill to report accurately itself is need to train. So how is this possible to make everyone able to report to you accurately?
That's a great question. And so what I found is that in order to achieve that in practice, these people need to basically collaborate internally on that. Because that role is now known to everyone in that team, because like 1 month I'm it, you're it next month, I know what you're going through because I was just that thing, you know what I mean? And I just spoke to senior management, I just know from senior management what they kind of want. I can kind of help prep you on that thing because you're now the leader this month. And so what I found in practice is that it kind of identifies to this whole squad what is required, and thus that squad can better collaborate and communicate upwards based on that leader role rotating. So that's what I found in practice. So the kind of nuance of your question, Arbor, to address that more directly is, you're right. I mean, like, this is why half of that role is kind of pushed into the squad level, and the other half of that middle management role is pushed upwards. I don't think you can remove that role entirely. I think you can kind of maybe restructure how that role is identified and how that role, the expectations around that type of role. What I found as well is that some people on this squad will kind of be natural leaders, and some people will kind of be naturally kind of a bit more reserved. And so I find the level of collaboration helps those more reserved folks maybe come out of their shell a bit more and kind of act a bit more as well, while the leaders can help support them inside the squad. So, like, for me, I found this to be effective, but I found this to be effective within a larger context, in that the senior management also needs to be supportive of it, right? You can't have a traditional senior management expect this to be like, like super, lean at the low level. You kind of need the full org to kind of be supportive of it. Does that answer your question a little bit, or
Yeah.
you're still a bit skeptical?
It's a good point that they will help each other to report report.
Yeah, cool. So I've been blabbing on for a little while. Oh, what's going on here? Oh, where am I at? There we go. Hey. That's something else I do. The last thing I do, and then I'll stop talking about this point, so I'll go on to the next question, is, I'll just speak about this without my iPad, is obviously I do one-on-ones. I think everyone's a bit familiar with one-on-ones. I've personally seen one-on-ones be abused in that they're kind of like nobody really knows what they're doing. Some people just talk about whatever, some people take it as a work meeting. Some people, everyone kind of structures it differently. Something that I do, something that I don't like that I've seen is folks that put all their one-on-ones on one day. They try to just get through all their one-on-ones on one day. And I personally just find that a bit silly because essentially, let's say, I have my good friend Max over here and I have my good friend Dan over here. If I'm doing my one-on-one with Max, I'm like, Max, you're done, man. I'm talking to Dan next. You know what I mean? That's super disrespectful to Max. And if we're doing a one-on-one about Max, if I'm telling him to get out because I need to talk to Dan, that doesn't seem right to me. So I don't really like structuring one-on-ones all in the same day. I personally like to put my one-on-ones on different days. So I'll maybe have Max on a Tuesday and I'll have Dan on a Thursday or something. So they're not I'm not feeling pressured to kind of stop one from talking to get to the other one. Something else I do is I ask my reports to come with 2 annoyances and 2 aspirations, and we'll just purely focus on that for the one-on-one. An annoyance is something that you're currently doing that you'd rather not. An aspiration is something that you'd rather do that you currently can't. And so it's kind of like 2 sides of the role. Something that you are doing that you'd rather not, and something that you aren't doing that you would rather do, right? And I ask them to come up with 2 of each. It can either be personal, it can be related to the role, it can be related to your terrible middle manager, it can be related to whatever you like, but I ask them to come with that prepared ahead of time so we can have a more focused discussion around those things, and then I spend my one-on-one just talking about those things. So let's just continue to pick on Dan because he's standing over there. Let's say I don't get enough coffee in the morning. I got to come up for stand-up at 10 a.m. I'm like, you know what? Fair enough, Dan. Let's try to move stand-up to 10:30, or let's try to get a barista in and make you coffee. Something I don't know. But we're trying to address that annoyance in some way, let's say your aspiration is you want to work on more ops and you're tired of JavaScript. Okay, maybe in a squad type of structure, we will try to rotate you into a squad that is more ops focused for the next couple of months. Maybe we'll try to do that. But I try to focus on annoyances and aspirations, and I try to ask the people that I'm doing one-on-ones with to come with those prepared ahead of time. So so that's kind of a multitude of things that I do. Hopefully that answers part of your question.
Thank you very much.
Cool. So that was one question. Yes?
I'm very interested by the strategy that you want to apply for the go-to-market for Guild.
Yes, great question. And so you kind of asked me this question when we were sitting down before, and just to repeat a little bit of kind of what you were asking about then as well. You were saying, the events industry is a bit cutthroat. And like how do we compete with like the Eventbrites or other kind of players like that and kind of go to market in general. So I think I might have forgotten to mention, I also sold a company, Ticketmaster Live Nation. And so I worked quite closely with Ticketmaster on the inside. So Ticketmaster, as you know, the largest ticketing vendor in the world. And Live Nation is their kind of artist agency arm of that. And so first of all, I agree with you. Yeah, 100%. Ticketing is a horrendous business. I hate ticketing. It's very cutthroat. And let's dive into why. So if you look at the nature of events, events are temporal, right? You have one event on Eventbrite. I can do the next event on Meetup. I can do the next event on Guild. I can do the next event on whatever. There's no loyalty in events because they're temporal by nature. It's kind of a one-off every single time. And so you can just keep moving from event platform to event platform to event platform. And what we find is that it's a race of margin compression. Whichever platform charges the least is what will kind of drive traffic. And why is that? It's because the events industry, it's fundamentally heavily commoditized. So what do I mean by commoditization? So commoditization is when everyone's basically offering the same product. If we look at it from, let's just say, like a petrol station, right? Every single petrol station you go to is going to offer you petrol. If you go to BP, they have petrol. If you go to Shell, they have petrol. If you go to Exxon, Esso, whatever it is, they're going to give you petrol. They're all selling you the same thing. So you're going to go to the one that's going to sell it for the cheapest. That's how commoditization works. So, essentially, what are the other forces around commoditization? If one of them has some sort of special additive they add to this fuel, let's say they add a special additive and it reduces your emissions by 10%, but they're charging you higher, maybe people start going to that one. But now every other one of them is going to copy the same thing. Every single one of them is going to start adding that additive because one of them has an advantage. Every other one of them is going to start doing it too, right? So maybe they add a loyalty program. Okay, now everyone will have a loyalty program. So fundamentally, the nature of commoditization is that when everyone's selling the same products and their models lose all uniqueness because everyone will try to adopt the same thing. And so applying that to the events industry, it's the exact same story, right? It's a race of margin compression where everyone's trying to charge the least for the same service. If you look at an event, it's basically a reminder to go somewhere at a time. You know what I mean? That's basically all an event is. And so everyone's going to charge the same. The lowest margin wins, basically, in terms of a cost perspective. In terms of a feature perspective, everyone's copying each other as well. If one person does iPhone registration, everyone's going to do iPhone registration. If one person does, like iPad sign up, whatever the heck it is, everyone's going to do that as well. It's going to be a race for everyone to adopt the same features. So at a very fundamental high level, I couldn't agree with you more. The events industry is very cutthroat. There's no loyalty. It's heavily commoditized. It's a horrendous business. I couldn't agree with that more. So the second part of your question, what are we doing about it? So in my opinion, when you're trying to enter a heavily commoditized industry, it's not worth trying to innovate on product because everyone will end up copying that same innovation, that same product innovation. Instead, in my opinion, you need to innovate on model. And that is the way to actually enter a commoditized industry. So if we take a look at Blockbuster, right? They're trying to sell, they're trying to rent out like DVDs out of a store. Along comes Netflix. They change the whole game. They just ship you a DVD to your mailbox, and obviously these days they have a full streaming service. They're both giving you the same product. They're both giving you Ghostbusters, you know what I mean? You get to watch Ghostbusters either way, but their model in doing so has dramatically changed the game. Instead of going from a heavily commoditized industry, they've gone to a whole new model. So applying it to fuel stations, instead of going to a fuel station, what if you get a truck that comes around to your house and fuels up your car for like, I don't know, $50 a month, whatever it is, right? I might pay for that if I'm doing it, frequently. Changing that model makes it much more innovative and much more attractive than doing the same thing that everyone else is trying to do. So, applying that to Guild, that's exactly what we're doing with Guild. We're actually not doing a ticketing first business. We're doing a sponsorship marketplace first business. And so, how does that manifest? So, a ticketing business is where all of you would pay a ticketing fee to come here, of course, right? But as I said, everyone else is doing that. The problem is, for the event organizers, they need to find this venue, they need to pay for the food and drink, they need to find the presenters, and all those things take, obviously, resources to do, but also money to do. Inversely, you have a lot of brands out there around the world that are trying to get in touch with this type of audience, right? That makes a very classical case for a marketplace model. Where we can provide a marketplace for brands to get in touch with communities being the most engaged audience, and by putting those brands in front of those communities, we can charge a fee on the sponsorship marketplace model. So again, taking a similar product, applying a different model, and that's what we believe is going to be able to disrupt that type of industry in the long term. Will we release Ticket in the future? Probably yes, but it's not going to be our primary revenue driver. Speaking of sponsorship marketplace, at Ticketmaster, for example, ticketing got about a 4% margin on ticketing. If you look at their annual filings, because they're a public company, they have annual filings. It's about a 4% net margin on ticketing versus sponsorship marketplace, Ticketmaster sponsorship marketplace, $1 billion in revenue, 65% net margin. So by being able to control supply and demand, by being able to have uniqueness of events and a unique kind of audience that you're trying to transact into, you can actually negotiate much higher margins as well because you have supply and demand kind of handled in the marketplace model. So yeah.
Get it.
Just sticking with that point for a little while, thanks for the illustration you provided on innovating on model or changing the model entirely rather than trying to innovate on product. Because otherwise, out of fear of the competitors just copying you. How do you ensure that you create a large enough moat around your new model that the competitors don't have enough time to then copy that model and then compete with you in that way. And depending on time, maybe that's even a nice segue into seeking investment in your experience of gaining investment in Guild.
That's a great question. So I have 5-10 minutes, five-ish minutes. Okay, cool. So I'll try to answer it in 5 minutes. I've only done 3 questions, so jeez. Okay, so fantastic question for what it's worth. So the short answer is network effects. And so how many of you are familiar with network effects? Yeah, generally speaking, yeah. I'm just going to show you this quickly. NFX guide. Oh, do I not have data? I don't have data, that's fine. Well, basically, if you search on your Google or whatever, NFX guide, there's a VC firm called NFX, like literally NFX, and they have a lovely guide, and that kind of reviews all the different networks. In fact, let me try to pull this up because this is actually really good. Let's see, Wi-Fi.
We haven't been given any details, so.
Let me just try guest.
Should I use my laptop?
Oh, let me just try this one, but if not, I'll try that. Thanks. Yeah. Nope. Log into captive Wi-Fi. No, I don't want to do that. Use other network. I thought I was literally just on a Wi-Fi. I'll just try this.
Connect to my Wi-Fi.
Let's just try my phone here. There we go. Cool. NFX fundraising manual, that one's all right. This one here, the network effects manual. Highly recommend familiarizing yourself with this. And so this basically goes over a million different things. The basics, kind of having brand embedded scale network effects. Stronger network effects are in the middle. So physical network effects, protocol network effects, personal utility, personal market network, and yada, 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 yada. The middle is the strongest. The further out it goes, it gets weaker and weaker. But it also goes critically into, you can see where my scroll bar is on the side. You can see how long this page is. It critically goes into a lot of different examples of different types of network effects. And so direct networks with local groupings, physical networks such as a telephone-based network, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll let you read this and go into much more detail there. However, I'll focus on this one example of a physical network effect, such as the example they provide here, which is telephones. I think that's a great example of what a network effect is. So when the telephone was first launched, if only I had a telephone, it's pretty useless because I can't call anyone. But once you also have a telephone, I can call you. And then once you have a telephone, I can call you. And then once you have a telephone, I can call you. You know what I mean? The more people that have telephones, the more they're networked together, the more value that network provides. And so basically the way to think about it is a network effect manifests in terms of more is more is more. The more telephones we have, the more people we can call. The more people we can call, the more value we get. The more value we get, the more telephones there will likely be. The more telephones there will be, the more people we get. And you can kind of see that kind of flywheel starting to form there in terms of more being more. And that's kind of the dynamic that you're looking for. Now, if there was a yodeling device where I could yell at you from a distance and I could talk to you that way, if we all have telephones, that probably won't do very well, right? Because we all already have telephones, right? And so, and there's a great amount of defensibility to having a telephone, because if we all have telephones and I stop having a telephone, I feel pretty left out, you know? And so, to answer your question in kind of a roundabout-ish way, in terms of defensibility, in terms of building that moat, we look to establish a strong network effect in order to make people feel more involved and kind of create a moat that makes it very difficult for any others to kind of enter. So in terms of, to apply the example of events versus Guild, which is a community platform, events struggle to find network effect because they're a non-network effect driven business. You kind of have a singular event entity. It's hard to kind of establish network effects within that. Versus a community platform where you have a recurrence of people attending many different types of community events, maybe going to presentations, maybe cross-proliferating into other types of communities within the same city. You might be here today, you might be at, I don't know, like React Advanced whenever that happens, or Lois's Kubernetes group, whenever that happens, you know what I mean? That's kind of a bit more of a network effect. By being a part of that network, you're getting more value. For more guilds joining that network, they get more value. You know what I mean? For presenters in that network, they get more value. And so it's again, more is more is more throughout that whole system, and everyone kind of achieves more value by being involved. That's also the nature of community, where in a community, the more we give to a community, the more we receive from that community, the more value is projected into that community, the more everyone kind of receives from it as well. So it's another kind of more is more kind of network effect type of model. So that's how we kind of look to combat that. And so fundamentally, marketplace model and network effect model go very well together. And it's a very good way of creating defensibility and trying to transact on the value of that entire marketplace together, contrasted with a SaaS model, which might struggle to find network effects as easily or as synergistically as a marketplace model. But that's yet another 30-minute, 1 hour long conversation. I mean.
Do you want to put your socials up on the screen or something?
Sure.
So people can follow you and ask any further questions.
Yeah. I'll just write it on here. So it's just Taz Singh. Oh, geez. Oh, no. I'm terrible at writing. Wow. Just TAZSINGH, but spelled properly with terrible handwriting. So feel free to follow me on Twitter or find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to message me there. I'll be hanging out as well. So yeah, it was lovely chatting. Great questions, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Taz.